we learned on Tuesday, that the Raiders are trading Davante Adams to the Jets for a conditional third-round pick in 2025. I want to let you know the conditions because it makes it pretty obvious that it's likely to stay a third-round pick. The Jets have to either make the AFC title game or Super Bowl, or Davante Adams has to be a first or second team All-Pro, both of which are very unlikely. The Jets making it that far would be more likely because we're in week 7 here. We're entering, and Davante Adams hasn't played half the weeks, and his numbers weren't good. So you're probably not getting to second team All-Pro. That means they picked up a great receiver for a mid-third round pick, Colleen, and yet like no one seems happy about it. People say, "Oh, the Jets doing Jets things again." I'm like, what am I missing? I think it's good. I think it's smart.
It's great for us just from a sheer entertainment value. I mean, him going to the Jets, there's no better place he could have gone. This is amazing. Going with Aaron Rodgers in New York with that media scene and a team that's 2-4. The only thing like they're really winning right now is all of our attention. And it seems to happen every single Tuesday. It's very see you next Tuesday of them, the name of our text chain. And yeah, there's winners and losers on both sides, and I feel like Garrett Wilson is both a winner and a loser.
Interesting.
In this trade because he's the most targeted man in football, and this will now things will ease up on him, but that will maybe allow more opportunities for him to have positive plays. But obviously, he's not going to be the number one guy, and how does that chemistry work in a locker room that's filled with big personality?
He was complaining about what was going on in the offense before any of this happened. Now he's got a guy who has like a mind lock with Aaron Rodgers, but I think it's ultimately positive. Good point about the winners of this trade being see you next Tuesday. NFL Daily. I didn't even think about that the Robert Saleh trade was the last time, or the Robert Saleh. You're just going to have to be forgiving of me
Greg.
on this show. But you're absolutely right that we were here for that one. And it is funny how after every crushing Jets loss, they just completely flip the narrative before 24 hours are even up so that everyone can be like, well, now it's a fresh start. We're starting all over. It's like that loss never even happened.
It's like you can get bangs, you can get a revenge body, but you're still going to be 2-4.
Right. But if they lose to the Steelers this week, it's like, what more can they do? I don't think they can do many more things. But I thought I think it is a smart gambit by the Jets. What do you think?
I couldn't help thinking that not only was this, first of all, the move that needed to happen, it's been in the works even before this last loss. You could tell with the timeline of everything that this was something that was a priority for this team to get done, regardless of whether they were going to win or lose on Monday Night Football. Especially after firing Robert Saleh, like you have to do something like this. You're basically pushing everything in on saying we are going to rebuild, or not rebuild, but give the quarterback the things that he wants, the things that he needs. Davante Adams being a huge one of those things. I also think that it's chips are on the table. We're going to try to push. Woody Johnson is saying such things at the league meetings this week, and we'll tee up the sound in a second. But it's also, this makes the job vacancy look better. It makes this job in general, with all
vacancy,
of
for next year?
For next year, look better. And I do want to point out too.
Wow.
Because, I mean, if you can keep some of this intact, let's say you don't get as far as you want because you have had this chaos right in the middle of the season, but you believe you're now on the right track and the right structure. You're extending some timelines here. It does, having weapons on this offense and promising somebody, especially an offensive-minded coach. And I love Ulbrich. I think he's a great coach. But saying, hey, you can come in and we already have this here for you. If you can basically be amenable to work with the quarterback, if he decides that's going to be in the equation for him too, this does make this job look a little bit better than it did 3 days ago, or even last week when we first got the news of the Robert Saleh firing. And also wanted to point out that Ian Rappaport was reporting that Davante Adams and the Jets have agreed to a restructure. Even so, not only are you getting him for this amount, which is way better than probably what the Raiders would have wanted. We're kind of putting out there that they would be agreeable to.
Well, they're not paying any money, so that was the part of it. I guess the Jets somewhat compromised.
But then the Jets get a restructure out of it too.
Right, but the restructure is just this year, like kind of spreading it around. And he wasn't making that much money anyways. He was making $17 million this year. So they just owe that salary essentially for the rest of the season, and they shuffled it around. The next 2 years, he is on the books for $35.6 million in each season. yes, he probably will want more guaranteed money coming into it, but I kind of look at that. I was like, well, that's about right. That's about
Yeah.
what a Davante Adams would cost. So I think it's a good point that it's not necessarily just a rental. If Aaron Rodgers is going to keep playing football next year, it
Exactly.
is probably going to be with Davante Adams as his teammate. And I keep going back to a mid-third round pick. So let's listen to the sound that you very professionally teased.
Getting better every week.
Woody Johnson at the league meetings explaining why he did it.
Salvageable. We're gonna kick. You can add the words after that. No, we're gonna do really well. We're gonna do well. Salvage is the end, but this is the beginning. Thinking is overrated. You have to look forward. You have to look forward to the games we're going to play each and every week, and try to win all of them. And that's basic stuff, right?
Are you
I was saying Talladega Nights. You've heard of that? Yeah. Remember that one scene? He said, "You're not a thinker. You're a driver." Right?
Well, that's what you want to hear about the person
Like a
making the biggest
passionate love
decisions.
scene in Talladega Nights. Ricky Bobby is not a thinker.
I
Very
love that.
intense.
I think that was prefaced by a question that said, well, the thinking is that you're going to do this. And so he's pushing back. He's going with instincts. He's extremely confident. Now, that's one of the reasons why Robert Saleh doesn't have a job is the expectations were so high because there's so much confidence and everyone's buying it. Rodgers he was in a great mood on the McAfee show, and everyone's talking up Jeff Ulbrich, and you almost wouldn't know that this team is 2-4. Now, I don't think Woody Johnson is on the DVOA future schedule rankings like I am, but the Jets do have the easiest schedule in the entire NFL, according to DVOA, for the rest of the season. And they've had the 6th hardest so far. So when you do look at the schedule, especially once you get past this week at Pittsburgh, there is some reason to believe, and you saw the offense play pretty well on Monday night, that this team has some winning left to do.
Sure, for sure. But I mean, they also need to figure out the Hassan Reddick of it all too. And I guess Drew Rosenhaus was at the game last night. There's just so much that is happening with this team. And they had the primetime game. It was a game that was super frustrating. Obviously, Davante Adams today, the midseason firing last week, and now Hassan Reddick changing agents and being given a 48-hour window for a trade to be figured out. There's just so much happening in New York at once.
Maybe they get a deal done with Reddick soon, and Woody Johnson alluded to it in that press conference, saying that this was our week to make big moves. And he essentially said more big moves are coming. What other big moves could there be?
Ago, now.
Right. So you can maybe get the pick back that you sent for Davante Adams. And let's just talk about Davante Adams for a second, because I've seen some commentary that, he's in the decline phase of his career. You're not going to get better trading for older players. And so I went back and I watched a lot of his targets and his snaps from this year. And Davante Adams is excellent. Davante Adams is still a top 10 receiver. Davante Adams is possibly, when he's on the field, still a top 5 receiver. So I thought this was a great move for the price that they sent, which, again, you're not going to get that conditional to move it up from a 3rd to a 2nd. We can assume the Jets are somewhere in the middle of the 3rd round. This is a mid-3rd round pick for either half a season or a season and a half of a top 10 receiver. That is more than fair. You should see the 3rd round picks that they've made in the Joe Douglas era. In the 3rd round picks, just the average 3rd round pick that is out there. People get so worked up about, you can't trade him for a 2nd. You can't trade him for a 3rd. Half those picks just don't work. And I know there's value in controlling costs, and you just don't want to give it away. But those picks are being given away willy-nilly once you get into the draft. It's like, hey, we want to move up 10 spots in the 3rd. We'll give up a 3rd. That's what's happening there. And so to me, I think it makes sense for what I believe is a known commodity, which is Davante Adams playing with Aaron Rodgers. We know Aaron Rodgers is at his best with guys who understand how he's thinking. That's why Allen Lazard in 2024 is a completely different and better player than Allen Lazard was in 2023.
Davante Adams is one of the best route runners in the entire league. So this is going to make Aaron Rodgers so much happier.
The one thing I still worry about with this team is the offensive line. They make mistakes in singular spurts. Like they just don't feel like they're playing together as a full unit. When they make a mistake, it is one guy compounding mistakes, or it is penalties, one guy or two guys at any given time compounding errors. I did like, though, Todd Downing as the play caller. He put together a nice little pressure mitigation script to open up a couple of those series, including running the ball more, including looking more balanced. I just think that not only does Davante Adams adding back into the mix give you more options with some of those pressure beater route concepts that including some of those quick slants, in breakers and outbreakers they're using in the beginning of the game, but also it just spreads everyone out a little bit wider, so you're not feeling so clenched and compressed as an offense in general. You have some breathing room, and I think that, to your point, Greg, earlier, it is usually, generally, with the mean of teams, it is not generally sound practice to overinvest in veterans on the other side of a certain number of years. However, this is not a team that believes it is functioning in the mean. This is a team that quite literally gathered pieces in order to make a push. And so now, if you commit to that, you can't sit in the gray area, you can't sit in the halfway zone. You know, there's a lot of chaos around the Jets right now, but one thing that I do think is the correct thing to do is to continue to push along the commitments that you've already made. And the ethos that you've already decided you're going to have, not change your entire build structure just because you fired the head coach.
Right. So I saw like getting put some pushback on Twitter that this wasn't a good trade. It's like, they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to win. It's like, yeah, I actually agree with that. I don't think they're going to get the second round pick because I don't think they're going to make the conference title game. Trading for Davante Adams does not change it enough for me, but I'm looking at this trade in a vacuum. They've already decided this is the strategy. And after deciding this is the strategy for this year, everyone's all in. The GM could be gone. It's an older team. You only have Rodgers for this year and maybe next year, whatever it's going to be. In that vacuum, I think it makes total sense because you mentioned it. Like their receiver group now, that with Lazard as a 3 and Garrett Wilson as a 2, it's a fun group. I think they have issues on their offensive line. I didn't have them making the playoffs.
Okay, so I have a question about the
season.
offensive line, and I feel like you brought that up like 5 minutes ago, and I've been thinking about it ever since. So with this offensive line, because obviously last night with Todd Downing, they mixed it up a little bit more and ran the ball, which was something that we haven't seen this season. But the week before, when they were playing the Vikings in London, Aaron Rodgers dropped back 54 times in that game. For the offensive line, at some point, aren't they fatigued because they're going backwards? It's way easier to play going forwards, like when you're run blocking. Just from that standpoint, I would think mixing things up with the run game, that might help the offensive line just a little bit because of that fatigue factor.
Yeah, what they were doing was allowing pretty much any defense to stay in their A+ pass rush plan, which just means because of what you said and then a bunch of other circumstances of what that looks like structurally, you are basically facing the most arduous and extraneous amount of pressure that you possibly can, because if you don't have dimension because you're not running the ball the way that they were able to a little bit last night.
That was their best running game of the season.
Yeah. And he looked more like himself than he has, and certainly produced like that. But and there was more balance. And again, getting some of the quick screens going, getting some of the quick slants in the passing game going, widens out the defense a little bit more. You're accounting for those areas of space on the field for the defenders. And then now you're able to, because you have a little bit wider space up front, you're able to run the ball through that space, and the blocking becomes easier. So it all fits together when you have just like that one extra layer, but knowing what to do with it, Colleen, which is the point you're making, knowing what to do with that extra piece in order to alleviate some of the stress and like tightness that you're feeling, some of the errors, some of the completely whiffed blocks, because you're not letting a team stay in their A+ pressure plan against you. It's a ripple effect. Having him on the field, but using him in the right way.
Playing way easier teams, playing the easiest schedule of the league. Like, everything is amazing. Like everything looks amazing when you just suddenly start playing like bad teams. Like the Bears are amazing now because they have 4 wins over like 1-win teams and play a bunch of bad defenses. The schedule really does explain a lot.
Simplifying that a little bit.
I mean, I'm just saying, you know what I mean though? Like it helps a lot. And I think they need to make the playoffs. We'll see if they do. Poor Mike Williams, who was thrown under the bus a little bit by Aaron Rodgers in that post-game press conference, and then also on McAfee today. While he was on McAfee, or a little bit after, like sometime in the same area, Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports reported that Mike Williams could be available in a trade, which just unfortunate. I wonder, I know it's a different scheme, but the Chargers, like, just give up like a conditional 6th for Mike
This
Williams
all
and pay
builds
for him.
toward your
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I haven't even mentioned the segment that's coming up because we have so much news to get to. The segment is stuff that will change. Like, we're in one mode of the season, but the whole league is going to be so different by the time
There's
we
chapters to
get
every
to
season.
December. And these teams that made moves today, they're so different already than they were 24 hours ago. I just want to, before we wrap up this part of the show, the Jets part, just want to say the last 2 seasons that Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams played together, granted they were younger men, they were different men. Davante Adams averaged 159 targets, over 1,450 yards, and 14 touchdowns in those
Wow.
2 seasons. And yeah, I think he's just going to feel so much more comfortable knowing what Davante Adams is going to do. But then again, Davante Adams thought it was going to be great to play with Derek Carr, and that didn't work.
and Rodgers is stacking friends. Sorry.
Yeah, no, he
Go
is.
ahead.
He totally is. It's fine. It's not even a great point, but it was just going to be them in their subprime is an improvement.
That is
That
good.
is a good point.
And
All right.
I mentioned the 3rd-round picks that Joe Douglas has made that everyone's in such an up in arms that they would dare to give away. Chuma Adogo, who's now with the Cowboys, Ashton Davis, Jabari Zuniga, Jeremy Ruckert, halfway decent tight end for them, and Malachi Corley. Those are their 3rd-round picks in the Joe Douglas era. Just saying. People don't need to go too crazy about that.